we got people joining. Hi, Rashida. Hi, Rolanda. Rolanda is my cousin, and she is one of the contractors for Edmond Enterprises.
Oh,
She
okay.
keeps us
All
in.
right.
She keeps us in order.
I love it. Okay, okay.
She
Well, welcome, ladies. I just want to say before we dive in, Quinn and I usually keep this pretty chill. This is kind of more so like a conversation based. Like I try to put tails from the water cooler, but it's like literally we're standing around having conversations before we really start the day off. So feel free to come on up at any point if you want to share something. You got a tip, you got a story, whatever it is. Feel free to come up. This is not really like an education. I mean, we give tips and stuff, but it's more so like an actual conversation base. So if you ever feel like, hey, I want to say something, I want to contribute, come on up here. We'll bring you up. I wish there's more than one host for this, but it is what it is.
Yep, it's fine.
All right, so we're gonna get into change management. Um, I feel like there's so much I could say. I feel like I say this every week or every time we do this, but there's so much that could be said about change management because y'all know business or change is the only consistent thing inside of business.
Yes.
And right.
And I guess
And
let's preface that we're speaking on organizational change management.
yeah, yeah, we'll say that because there's so much that goes into it, and there's like little micro stuff that goes into it too. So, I guess we'll just go ahead and get started on that because I pretty much this is pretty much all I do is change things inside businesses with the policies and processes, or helping them change. And I'll say for myself, one of the biggest things or issues is not necessarily the change itself, but like getting people into like a consistent process. So like people have processes, they usually have policies, but like my biggest thing is actually getting like them to actually follow it. Or if they had something in place before, getting everyone else, like the team on board. Because a lot of times, at least this is my experience, I can only speak for that. A lot of times when I come into these businesses or organizations, they have these things in place, like they have it, but if I ask like the teams, they don't know what's actually happening, or they're just like, where is this stuff at? Or I didn't even know we had, like, I heard this a few times. I didn't even know we had a knowledge base. I didn't know we had same operating procedures I could look at. And so whenever like I come in to help like make changes, like the day-to-day changes, it's pretty much a hot mess. And usually I have to have like HR, if they have an HR, by the way, come in to kind of like help with the transition because like people get mad at me. I'm just like, I look, I'm just hired to do the processes and stuff and make sure it goes along with what they want to do. But yeah, so Cornetta, I want to bring you in too. So when businesses make changes, whether they let the team know or not, how does HR help like alleviate this? So they're not
Well,
yelling at me all the time.
oftentimes HR should help lead and facilitate the change management process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Many times, hopefully, like you have like HR individuals that are skilled and have a knowledge of leading change initiatives strategically. And so they're able to walk you through the different phases. I think we see so many faux pas or misses in organizations where individuals, they mean well, but they miss these steps, right? And one of the
Mm-hmm.
important things is, I guess, let me go through those 5 steps of change management. First is to acknowledge the need for change, right? And then step 2 is to design a plan for the change. Step 3 is implementing that plan. And step 4 is embedding the changes into the company culture. And lastly, step 5 is going back and analyzing the results so that you can, make tweaks as needed. But sometimes people will get awareness that some changes need to take place, either by way of employees voicing concerns, or maybe they actually have an engagement survey or something like that. And they just start changing things or implementing processes, but they don't step back and get like the right people in the room or the right stakeholders together to make sure that they're on the right path. Now, I like to keep things kind of light. So I'm going to just touch on first, I want to acknowledge this week we celebrated Juneteenth. And I know Edmund Enterprises, we took off, for Juneteenth. And it was interesting to see some of the commentary online. And I think some of these were failed attempts at answering request for change, where some individuals or some organizations maybe were open on Juneteenth,
Mhm.
and so they made an effort to try to recognize Juneteenth, but some of the photos and things that were shared, they
Oh my
offended
God.
people, right? And that's part of not having a strategic plan to answer, those requests for change, and having the right people or stakeholders a part of the process, but just going and just, implementing, you know. And like you mentioned, communication is a key. And I think sometimes when folks hear communication, they're thinking of outward communication, but communication is a two-way street. It's both.
Mhm.
It's making sure that you're informing your audience or your organization of what's going on, but part of communication also includes listening to them, and more importantly, actively listening to what their requests are and their wants and needs. And that's one of the areas where I think, folks kind of miss it.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought up Juneteenth. I feel that's I didn't even think to like lead with that because I've seen actually there was somebody online in my local area. They were talking about like how their company threw like a party, but apparently they had something else going on that week. So like they had like a circus or something. I don't know. It was weird. They had some kind of like weird setup, and God, I can't remember what the world they were serving, but it just kind of came to me. I'm just like, they made Juneteenth a national holiday and everything, but a lot of these companies still are missing the mark when it comes to like why this is important. And like, even though a lot of them may not care, but it's just like your employees do, your teams do. So it's like figuring out like that, like, where do we fit in with that?
Yeah, and that's again, that's an important step of embedding the changes in the company culture, right? But also making sure that you have the stakeholders. Like I reshared a photo that someone, again, this was a real photo from this past Wednesday. The person said, I am so offended by this.
Yeah.
Like they basically threw a table up and they had a bowl of ice with little small individually wrapped pieces of watermelon
Oh
in it,
no.
and they had like some business cards that said like Happy Juneteenth and like a little banner, and that was their Juneteenth acknowledgement for their employees. And again, it's one of those things that it just makes you like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they did that. But I'm sure, unfortunately, they probably thought whoever put that together probably thought they really were doing something. They
Yeah.
probably thought like, oh, we're gonna, have something, and again, they ended up kind of missing the mark, but also offending, you know, like some of the employees, and and again, like going back to just having those stakeholders in place is so important. I think that the acknowledgement for the need to change, like if we go back to step one of change management, there needs, you'll agree to this, I'm sure, Adriana, there needs to be the acknowledgement of the need for change, but I
Yeah.
think there also needs to be an identification of why do we need the change, that needs to be communicated throughout the organization so that folks really understand, like, why are we doing this, right? Because change can be difficult. Not everyone likes to have change.
Mhm.
um, you know, especially if you're like within an organization and you're making history. Like there's a quote that says, history never, when you're going through history, it never looks like history when you're going through it. And oftentimes it's
Right.
confusing and uncomfortable until you make it through it. And so you need to make sure that everyone's aligned and on the same page and they understand what is the goal that we're working to. Why is this important? Why? Because sometimes change management means implementing additional steps to your work processes. And I can't tell you the number of times I've seen people, and you probably have too because you help document and create processes, people rolling their eyes or sucking their teeth like, why are they doing this? Why are they making it more difficult? Because they don't realize that, again, sometimes in streamlining processes, you end up implementing some different processes as part of, the steps that need to be taken. But once you kind of get things in motion, like at the end of the phase, you might
Mm-hmm.
find that it creates some cost savings for you guys. Like there was one organization I was working with that, we kind of found in their processes, their hiring process, because they were trying to brush people through the process. We kept having these incidents where they would go ahead and send people over to do like the drug screening, and then there was some other medical testing that needed to take place. Well, guess what? You're sending them over there, and the company's being charged anywhere between $500 to $700 per person for these tests. And
Yeah.
then you get a week or two but later, you get back their criminal history report. And there's not a prayer in the world that could have that person work for this company. There's nothing we could do that, like, oh, well, let's just overlook this, or there's no way. There's just no way. And so, what I show them is if we just slow down our process just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and wait for this very, very important step of making sure that they meet the minimum requirements as it relates to their background check to be able to work here before we send them and pay the additional fees and monies to have them tested, on the medical side and the drug screening, we actually could save X amount of dollars, right? And so, and again, like that's where the strategic, side of HR comes into play with being able to like have the foresight to be able to like look at the data. Let's take a look at how many of these incidents occur per month. And then let's look at our costs. So on average, it costs us $700 every time we send somebody over to get this testing done. So now we're able to quantify this because if we have 10 of these cases or incidents happening per month and we do the math,
Mm-hmm.
then that's $7,000 that's being spent unnecessarily monthly on people that we never would ever be able to hire. And so, again, like rolling that out, it created some angst, but having
Yeah.
the foresight that yes, it's going to create some anxiety for some people, right? For the ones that may look at it as you're slowing our process down and we're trying to get people in the seats to fill these positions as quickly as possible. But when I stepped back and took my time and explained the why, and then I presented the data and the potential loss that we were experiencing as a result of rushing the process, one individual spoke up and said, "You know what, Clonetta, that makes sense. Like, I get it. Like, you're right. I completely get it." And so, um, for me, that's just an example or testament of, managing through change management, like for an organization where, again, that initially it's going to be uncomfortable for people to implement the newer additional steps, but again, helping to step back and explain the why so they then can frame their mind around it and get on board, it's a win-win.
Yeah. Definitely. I just want to stop really quick and just say, hey, y'all that came in, feel free to come up at any time. We kind of just keep this conversational base instead of kind of like point one, this is this, point two, this is that, blah, blah, blah. Like this conversation. So if y'all want to take part of it, feel free to come up at any point. If you want to give an example, if this is your zone of genius and you want to share some tips, we would love that as well. But in the meantime, we'll just keep the conversation going. And thanks for being here. So I'll say just to kind of like hop on what you were saying, whenever so a lot of times like whenever I go into businesses and stuff, a lot of people don't have HR, and this is an HR function that honestly is needed, but a lot of people don't really realize that they need it. But anyway, so one of the things I've had to do was kind of help implement a communication line, and even though mine is like communication with documentation, it's just kind of like still have to figure out like, okay, what's wrong? Like, why do we need to make changes? Things like that. And a lot of times when I go into these things, people don't really like me, so to speak, because I'm kind of like they see me as the cause of making the changes, even though it's called upon by the company. But anywho, I digress. One of the bigger things was communication. So I also want to kind of point out too, like as like small business owners, like I don't know if all of us or many of us may not have a team, especially when it comes like HR and stuff. Like we may not have that. So like the biggest thing here, whenever it comes to implementing change inside the business, because like we know, the only thing consistent in business is change. So whenever you want to implement something, it needs to be communicated. So like figuring out different touch points of communication. So like until you hire who you need to hire inside your business, if that's part of your succession plan, like you want to have a team and all that good stuff. Like a part of that is figuring out how you can communicate better. So I did want to make note of make sure your communication lines are open and not necessarily having to share every little thing, but especially when you have a team, you want to make sure they know exactly what's happening. So, like, whenever you do implement change, it's a little bit easier to deal with because a lot of times we end up having to go back, even though it's like we want to change this, like, we have to actually figure out, like, okay, communication, like, how are you going to communicate this stuff to everybody? And when it comes to pushback, HR, like, Canada isn't usually the one that would handle that, but like when they don't have that, it's just like, what do we do from here? So, like, starting with the basic of communication definitely helps. And I would love, Clint, if you have any other tips too, because
Yeah.
I preach, I tell my people, like whoever I work with, like please get an HR, like even if it's just on a like back pocket or an occasional, what do they call it, fractional now,
Yep.
a
Or
fractional
even like now, I know, and I'm gonna pick on my friend too, who also has an HR consultant company. Like I know we at Enterprises, we launched this month our HR Whisper on Demand for people to be able to get that advisement. I know she offers an HR on demand package as well. So even having like those resources available to have like a coach in your ear providing you with the strategy and the how to so that you can implement these things successfully is imperative. But one of the things I wanted to mention that is an irritant for me or a pet, well, an irritant or pet peeve, I would say in my corporate days, because I would see this, and some of y'all will chuckle because you've seen it too. You get a new leader that comes into the organization or somebody that's hired for the role. Like, don't make change just for the sake of making change. Like, somewhere along the line, someone taught folks that, like if you're stepping into a new role or especially a leadership role, you got to change something. And I've seen people make unnecessary changes just to quote unquote kind of make their mark, right? And and again, those are the things that like they kind of invalidate or they take away the validity of
Mhm.
like the need for change management when you really need to institute like real change for an organization because people are worn out because they've had these experiences where leaders have come, and again, folks that are doing that, they're usually not successful and they're usually not someone that's going to last in the role, so they're just passing by, right? They're just look, they're there for a good time, not a long time. And so they come in and now they've made these changes, and then you look up and in the next year you have a new leader, and it's like it's disruptive to the organization. So one, acknowledge the need for change and the why, but also evaluate if it's really necessary. Like, what is going to be like the outcome, or what are the implications going to be, and are they going to have a positive effect on the organization, or are they going to prevent some liability? Like, that should be kind of your, one of your checks and balances is evaluating, is it going to impact some positive change, which could be some cost savings, helping to tighten up your budget, or is it going to prevent some liability where we could incur some additional charge from fines or things of that nature or lawsuits? But again, just implementing change for the sake of change to be able to say, hey, I came into the organization and I changed this in the first 3 months. Like, don't
Right.
do that. Don't do that to your organization.
I love that you brought that up because that's been like another thing. Like people feel like they have to implement change or just because they're trying to keep up with trends. That's been the biggest thing. Like trying to keep up with all these trends and stuff. And they feel like they have to do these changes. And it's just like, you don't need to unless you have the data to kind of like back it up. Like the data from your current processes to kind of back it up and like, okay, yeah, we probably should implement it. Like, you don't really need to do that. So I'm really glad that you brought up that tip too.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to hear from the people that have joined us, like just their take and their experiences of operating through change management. Whether you've been leading change management or part of an organization that has gone through change management, like what have been some good things that have occurred, or what have been some of the not so good things. So I see we have Brooklyn coming up to the stage. Hey, Brooklyn.
Hey.
Hi, ladies. How are we today?
Good, good. I know you have some good examples because you're a
Yes,
change
I'm
management
waiting.
queen.
Well, I just wanted to pop on really quick because I'm listening to this conversation and I thoroughly enjoy it. So I want to thank you both for bringing this to light because I think it's so imperative. I think the lost art sometimes when we join a new organization or a new group or whatever it is as executive leaders, I almost wonder if the lost art of the 30, 60, 90. And when I say that, remember, and Clonetta, I know this will resonate with you, but remember when you joined a new position or you got promoted and the leader took time to absorb the first 30 days? What happened to the
Mm-hmm.
absorption of the first 30, the next 60 adopting, and then the next 90 owning? We don't
Yeah.
make grave changes, impact, objectives, KPIs. I mean, it's to come in and absorb as a new leader. I really hold that philosophy to my team, clients, etc., in the 30, 60, 90 because the absorption is so critical to know what's working, what's not, how are we going to handle it, to see that true vision. And if you're not taking time, like you mentioned, to actively listen, you're skipping out on the absorption phase.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's gotten lost in just this whole, again, like there was a cultural shift
Mm-hmm.
where, again, as businesses do need to focus on revenue, right? But there just became so much focus on revenue and the bottom line that I think leaders feel so much pressure that, like, I have to show that, like they put me here for a reason, so I just have to change something. But you're right. Folks need to get back to that 30, 60, 90, philosophy and really understand in their organizations. Like one of the things, like when I would go to a new position or role, like within that first, like 30 days, I was on the roll for sure. Look, sometimes I was on the roll through the duration of the assignment, but like I definitely was on the roll. Like I wanted to get out to the different plant locations and go and like spend time to learn the culture and understand like some of the pain points to get a full, like view of the organization, which also would give you insight too as to whether or not you have a company culture change that needs to take place, or if you have like nuances or things that are more location based that are kind of brewing. And so, yeah, I totally agree with that whole, like the 30, 60, 90 philosophy.
Absolutely. And then, one of the other lost arts that I feel is, and I really attribute this one to more of the EOS model, and I'm a huge advocate for EOS, but the second book that Gino Wickman wrote was Rocket Fuel. And it's going in as an executive and almost like an implementer because, well, Clenetta knows I'm a really big integrator. Integration is amazing, but also to know exactly what your new leader or how you can fit into the phase and really take off at the beginning of your 30 days and become so successful is really to take a wish list from that owner, CEO, executive team and say, what is it that if you look 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, that you want your company to be at? And how can we make that happen? I would write a wish list, and I kid you not, that would be like 3 pages long because I would take in everything from the executive team And then I'd put that into a roadmap and I would generate what that's going to look like in 5 years from today. And then I go and make that happen. I think if we put more focus into ourselves personally and professionally the first 30, 60, 90, and then how do we apply that vision? How do we generate that roadmap? I think that if we become those professionals that have that mentality right from the gate, you're set up for success in anything that you do. I don't care what industry you're in.
Yeah, no, I think so. Like, I think that's awesome, creating that roadmap. And I'll be transparent with you. Like, I don't, I told you, like, even recently this morning, you are phenomenal, Brooklyn. But I will tell you, there are folks in these larger organizations sitting in these, like, VP roles and whatnot. They don't even have the bandwidth or the foresight to even be able to do such a thing that you just described, right? To be able to like create that roadmap and then take from that roadmap and create a 5 year plan. And so I think that, to your point of upskilling, like as a leader, like that's necessary. Like, you need to make sure that you're constantly evolving and constantly growing your skills and your, toolbox so that you can continue to be effective for any organization that you're leading.
I just want to say I love, Brooklyn, that you brought up the roadmap because that's something I've been trying to get more people to implement too. Because I do the succession planning roadmaps, and it's pretty much the same exact thing that you mentioned. Like we focus so much on the right now, which we should not say that we shouldn't, but like we need to also take into account like, hey, things are going to happen, like especially when it comes to change management and everything too, like things are going to happen within the organization or business and stuff that we're not going to probably anticipate. But if we have a roadmap, it at least helps with staying on track. So like, yes, if you do have to make changes stuff, like it still falls in line with what your vision is years from now. So I just want to say I love that you brought that up, and that's something I definitely tell people. I call it session planning roadmap. There might be something else, but definitely plan for not only right now, but like the future. And honestly, when you do that, it's so much easier to streamline and make plans and hire the right people and stuff when you do that. So thank you again. I love that y'all brought that into the
I
conversation.
think that much more important, like for the business owners that you're working with, Adriana,
Mhm.
oftentimes, because they could use that as like their accountability tool. Because, like,
Right.
especially if you're growing and you're thriving, you will have people try to attach themselves to you, or they'll come to you. We need to partner. Like, let's do this business together. And you can use that roadmap to refer to as your checks and balances to see, okay, does this initiative fall in line with my plan, my 5 year plan? And if it does not, then that means that that's not the right venture for you to jump into.
Yep, and that's exactly what I had to kind of do for myself too. It was just I was going into so many different like partnerships and like adding all this stuff, and then like when I really looked at it, I'm like, this don't even make sense for me to be even doing, especially long term. Like it's not something I can like build up long term.
Yeah,
I've actually had to cut stuff, and that's why I kind of had to like slow down a bit even this year, just because I was adding so much. I'm just like, this doesn't even make sense for me right now. So
yeah.
yeah, that's where I'm at. So that's total personal update.
No, but that, like, that's important because, again, like, people will start coming and, like, wanting to attach, let's do this, let's do that. And it sounds good and it's probably really great ideas and great initiatives, but you have to make sure they align with your destiny and the path that is designed for you. And so I like that roadmap because you can go refer back to it and see, okay, does this either help move me along my path or is it going to pull me away? And then that's your answer on whether or not you need to,
Right.
connect yourself with it.
Yeah, I'm just like sitting here looking like, this honestly, I was doing way too much. And I was like, too much partnerships. I'm trying to like, you're trying to cut that stuff down now. I'm just like, all right, let me cut this one. This one makes more sense. Like, yeah, just too much. Like, I was like, I had to cut off a lot of stuff. I was doing stuff like the business center and stuff locally and everything. So I gotta take a break
No,
and
no, I hear
realign.
you. I hear you. I'm interested to hear from you, like where you have, like you've seen a need for change with an organization, and maybe they just weren't there, like they weren't getting it, or they weren't really seeing the vision. How were you able to coach them to make those changes?
Honestly, just going back. So I like implementing strategies stuff from like organizational design and development. So that's where like the roadmaps came from. Honestly, once we figured out like, okay, like you're trying to do all this stuff, but where like is this gonna matter like shoot, even 6 months, I was gonna say a year, but like even 6 months down the line, because a lot of people focus on like again, focus on okay, I need to do this. The biggest things like I see, even with like some of the I don't want to say bigger, but I guess bigger than what I'm normally used to working with. They're not technically classified as big. But anyway, a lot of people focus more so on marketing and like they want to hire marketing, want to hire these big sales team. And then whenever I come in and kind of like look over the process and the stuff, it's just like you need to focus on retention. Like marketing's not the issue. Like you need to focus in, we need to focus on this. So like instead of trying to uproot everybody and try to add more to the team and then probably have to do like a layoff months from now, focus on doing this. So I'll say my changes more so focus on like what other things they could be doing and making sure the current team that they have is actually efficient. Because a lot of people will hire stuff and then they're not utilizing them. Like there are instances where people had team members. I was guilty of this myself too. Like I would hire people and like the people will work for like a month and they were just sitting there because I didn't really have a plan. So like figuring out like, okay, what are you trying to do long term? Does this make sense? Like hiring these people right now, and like what can you be doing better right now to help push for that? So yeah, that's been my instance or examples.
Okay, okay. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share? I'm interested in hearing again some of those good or bad like experiences with change management.
I'll say some of my while we wait. I'll say some of my. I don't want to. They weren't bad. I guess they were kind of bad because I wasn't able like to help finish finish the project and stuff. So like one of my examples were with working with people that were kind of like what's the term? Like they were already stressed. So like they already like in the moment like okay like they had to implement change fast and even though I could do that, like it wasn't like the best method because like there were so many other problems and I hate saying this out loud, but like I've done this like years ago because I was still like trying to figure things out. But like they hired me for like, the process stuff and like trying to implement the change and like it didn't go too well just because they didn't have like the structure to like handle the change. So like it was just a mess.
Mm-mm.
And then I could even stay on long enough because they ended up not being able to maintain. That was like when a lot of people were kind of like going out of business, like early last year. Was it 2023? Yeah, like end of
Oh,
2022,
okay.
23. Yeah, so like they were kind of like at their wits end. So like whenever they do that, I always recommend like please make sure you have a budget to handle and like don't hire out of desperation and stuff. But I also could turn down the job. I saw that being terrible. But still being me, it's like I could do it and no.
Oh goodness. No, and I mean it's
Yeah.
interesting because it can be on a smaller scale or larger. Um, like on one of the larger, I was with an organization that they were in the middle. Like they created my role in the middle of like a revamping. Like so they were in
Mhm.
startup mode, and so they closed their plant locations in one region of the country, the Midwest, and they decided someone had this great idea. They pitched some leader that they needed to move all the manufacturing to the South. So I found myself flying again, like Brooklyn said, like coming, on board. I was going down every week. Like I actually, there was a point in time where I had an apartment down there. It was Tennessee, and and I had my house here. So like, cause I would fly in Tuesday morning and come back like Thursday night. And I realized like there were so many issues with this transition. Like we couldn't find the right people, the right talent to hire, like to fill, the roles and And I was doing everything, building partnerships with training programs, and then there were just so many other issues that were coming up. And, again, I go back to the data. I was able to collect enough data to be able to present to leaders within the organization and keep it more, data driven and fact based without attacking, the person who came up with the idea, right? Or kind of got the ball rolling on this. But the data just showed that this was not the right move for, um, to move all of the production to that location. And so it resulted in keeping a plant location open in the Midwest that initially was being slated to be closed down. And so that's why it's so important that, again, where you have the capacity and you have, your organization may be on the road of change management or making changes. If you see that it's not the right change, you can't be afraid to deviate from that change. Like, don't just try to push it through because, oh, we're already on this road and we want to save face. But, use your data points to really measure if it's effective. And again, is it going to help improve the organization? Actually, we have Yolanda that's come up to the stage. Yolanda, we'd love to hear from you.
Good morning, ladies. Good morning. If I sound kind of rough, it's because I suffer from chronic bronchitis and it flares up every now and
Oh,
then.
okay.
If you can't hear me, just tell me to try to talk louder. Excuse me. My experience with HR, because I come from a government side. Um, HR with that agency was hired based on nepotism. The agencies I come from really hired like neighbors or family members, even though they may not have had that experience as a HR personnel, they hired them anyway. HR didn't do anything of what any of you are talking about, and we always had issues with that. Our HR only focused on just the um, hiring process and just putting people through orientation, and that was it.
So
They
they were
really had
administrative then. They're
right,
highly
right, they
administrative, or like they
right.
used
They
to
was
call it personnel.
Yes, there
Okay.
was more of that. There was
Yeah.
more of that. And there were many times, many of us had issues with our payroll. And when you mess with people money,
Yeah.
people go crazy, because
Mhm.
people got bills to pay. And then it wasn't like it was years ago. If payroll or if HR made a mistake on your payroll, they can immediately just fix it. No, 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 no. You have to wait till the next pay period. So a lot of what you guys are talking about, that's what they should have had going. But I don't know what type of HR person, our agency had. Now with me, because I retired from my government job 2 years ago due to medical reasons, but now that I'm full time working on my own organization to keep down overhead, I just contract people out that I need at that time. Like I had just recently hired a marketing person, like what Miss Adriana was talking about. Um, I had hired a marketing personnel just to tell me what is it that I need to change, modify, tweet, or whatever, because I have a lot going on. And they asked me, they said, well, how do you get the information out there for people to attend your annual events and, this and that? And I explained to them, I said, well, it's pretty much a lot of times through word of mouth. And the reason why I had it set up that way is because at the time when I was under domestic violence, I wanted to keep myself and my guests safe because you never know someone who had served 10 or 15 years in prison may find out about some type of event going on, and because they may still feel that hate or animosity towards their partner who the partner didn't land them in prison, they landed themselves in prison. You never wanted to have them show up and harm anyone. So a lot of my events were always private. Well, they asked me, well, what about social media? I'm like, social media? What are you talking about? Because I'm old school. I'm like, what you talking about social media? And they was like, well, are you on LinkedIn? I said, well, I, I didn't even know LinkedIn was still around. I said, because I was on LinkedIn when it first came out in the early 2000s. They said, well, you need to get back on LinkedIn. I said, well, I'm on Facebook. Isn't that enough? It was like, no, you need to get on LinkedIn because, LinkedIn is a professional page and this and that. And I said, okay. And I see that, LinkedIn has changed over the years. But going back to the HR, yes, it's important that you have a competent, shall I say, HR department, because if they're not competent, it's gonna cause some issues within the organization designing, shall I say. But yeah, I just wanted to just share that yes, I've had some terrible HR personnel. There was more just administrative. They didn't do anything. It was like they were just picked because they was a relative of somebody,
Oh
So
no.
yeah, and that's a big thing that goes on in government agencies. They hire according to, who they know. Instead of what they hire people based on who they know, and that can be a downside for many.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. No, you piqued my interest. I can't let you step away without telling us what you do and what your business is.
I first started out just wanting to find a way of paying it back because when I was going through domestic violence, me and my two small kids at the time, we were living in Illinois. And the shelter really helped us, even though we had to move at least 3 times because you can only stay in a domestic shelter for a certain amount of time and then you got to move on to another one. But they helped us out greatly. So when I was deployed to go to Iraq during a Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, there was a platoon sergeant. He was having a affair with another senior NCO, and because of that, she wanted to break it off with him because they both was married, and she realized, hey, I shouldn't be doing this. Well, she tried to break it off, and while we was in Iraq, she came to me because I was assigned to an all male platoon, so I had my own separate quarters while we was out there. And she came to me one night. It was around 12 midnight, really. And she had a huge handprint, like a bruise on her side of her face. And I asked her, I said, Sergeant so-and-so, what happened? And she said, I tried to leave him. And I said, okay. And he did that? And she said, yes. And he told me that if I leave him, he was going to kill me because if he can't have me, nobody can have me. And that triggered that piece in me because when I was with my kid's dad, he had strangled me the first time. It was like a shock because he never put his hands on me. So I thought, well, maybe it was something I said, so I'm gonna, let this go, but that was a shock. Didn't know he was killing me slowly because I was seeing silver specks in my eyes. I didn't realize I was dying until years later when I received therapy. But yeah, so I turned him in. I was the whistleblower, and he was put out the military. His entire military career had went down the tubes because of me whistleblowing and reported it. But of course, that didn't go too well because the higher commanders and higher senior NCOs, they protected him all these years, and all of the other soldiers were afraid to even call him out on the carpet. I wasn't, because that was a trigger for me, and I said, you know what? I need to report this, and I did. So every year since, I would say, for the first 5 years that I started Domestic Violence LLC at the time, I paid out of my own pocket because I did not want to charge anyone. So people ate free. They came to the events free. I had speakers that spoke. I had entertainment. All of that I paid out of my own pocket. I didn't care about charging anybody. I just wanted people, the community, to know about domestic violence and the dynamics of it all, how it affects a family. It doesn't just affect the individual that's going through it, but it affects everybody. When I had to file my income taxes, my CPA said, Miss Jones, I could see you doing this for 1 year, maybe 2 years for free, but you've been doing this now for 5 years for free. You're gonna have to start charging people. I said, but I don't want to do that. It's important for me to that the people know what's going on about domestic violence and ways to know the signs. And she said, Miss Jones, if you don't stop charging people, I'm not going to be able to file your, continue to file your income taxes for you. I was like, oh man. So on the 6th year, I started charging people $50. And my CPA was upset with me again because she said, Miss Jones, you are, you know, using your own money, and you got a chef that have been trained by the highest of chefs, the Cordon Bleu, and they're serving your guests 5-star, 5-course meals, and you only charging them $5. I said, yeah. So now I have to charge, but I changed the name recently to Generational Wealth Education and Awareness because my grandparents did not leave something for my parents. My parents did not have anything for me and my siblings. I don't want that domino effect to go down to my grandchildren. I said, so before I leave this earth, I want my grandchildren to have something. Also, the victims and the survivors, when they come out of domestic violence or abuse situation, a lot of them are financially challenged because they have depended so much on their partner, their significant other, that they have nothing of their own and they have to start all over from scratch. However, so teaching them about the generational wealth and how to financially plan for safety exits, when they do exit, at least they'll have something to stand on. They'll already have a foundation, a financial foundation. So that's what I'm all about. So I do the webinars, I do late night podcasts, and at one time was uploading them on YouTube, but now I have my website where it went through the whole optimization type of thing, and so now I just record on my own website. So all of my recordings from just about any topic that is often taboo that most people are afraid to talk about, such as bullying, racism, discrimination. It's real talk with me. I don't hold nothing back.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So we are going to find you on LinkedIn here, and hopefully you have your do you have like your links and things so that we can find that podcast on your page? Yolanda, can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had it on mute still. Yes, it's
Oh,
yes. You can go ahead and click on my website, and the recordings are all on my website. Yes, ma'am.
okay. All right. I'm gonna kick it back to
Thank
Adriana.
you for sharing. We are gonna get ready to wrap up the room, but if there's any last minute tips, stories you want to share, please do. But thank you guys for joining us this week. We plan on coming back on July. I don't have my calendar pulled up. We'll be back on LinkedIn in 2 weeks, whatever 2 weeks from now is. I don't have the date, my bad, but we'll be talking about a different topic. And if there's ever a topic you would like for us to discuss or you would like to join part of, feel free to let Claire I know and we'll get that scheduled. Other than that, Claire, do you have any little last words you want to say?
No, I think this was a good discussion. Just around change management,
She might have
and
stepped away.
Yeah, and the importance. Oh, I'm
If
sorry.
not, I guess I will get ready. Oh, there you are.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I was just saying, I think this was a good conversation around change management and the importance of it and implementing it right. And so I'm thankful for, the speakers that came up to share insights. Thank you, Brooklyn and Yolanda, and then to all of our guests who joined us.
Yes, it was really great. Thank you.
Of course. Well, I guess I will go ahead and let this room close out. Thank you guys again for being here. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another topic. Just keep an eye out for that. Now make sure y'all are invited to the little event link.
All right. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye.